Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its meeting held on January 8th, 2013. The meeting set forth a schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona CD-ROM Times, the Star Ledger, the Herald News, and the Township of Verona and the Verona Education Association. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted in each of Verona's 6 schools, the board office, and town hall. This posting was also sent to the above newspapers, all SEA presidents and SEA liaisons. The Verona Board of Education operates under consent agenda format. Any board member has a right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda have been made available to the public present. Mr. Spartel, Mr. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Bellino.
Here.
Mr. Yunus.
Here.
Mr. Quattrochi.
Here. Okay, welcome to our December meeting. Just as a reminder, we have tonight's meeting as the only meeting in the month of December, given the holidays at the tail end of the month, and our next meeting is going to be on January 7th, which will be our reorganization meeting and swearing in of the new board members, of the new board. We do have one change to the agenda tonight. Mr. Farician's fall athletics update has been rescheduled, so that will not take place tonight. It'll take place at in January. And we do have 2 presentations, though. One is Mr. Vinci is here from Lurch, Vinci, and Higgins, who are our auditors, and you'll present the annual audit report and corrective actions that have been recommended. And Mr. Forte will do a hazing, intimidation, and bullying report, which is a requirement to be done in public. So with that, any public comment or question on the agenda or any agenda item?
Al, the old 15 Howard Street. On your resolutions, number 7, could someone explain that to me?
That's,
Oh, I'm sorry, there is a typo on number 7, by the way, on the word, that's not access, it should be assess,
oh, yeah, sorry.
if that cuts.
No, well, I just, you know, all right. That's,
That makes it sound a little different.
that makes it sound a lot different, yes, okay.
I pointed that to John earlier.
Okay.
I think that should be a
All right, then we'll,
Nothing like a spelling error at a Board of Ed.
right. Then we'll go right to number 11, that resolution. Is that a requirement that you have?
Yeah, we talked about that the last meeting. You want to, Mr. Forte, Ms. Nardino, address that one? That's on Phoenix Advisors.
And that's required by the state to, before you have a referendum, that you have to have financial advisors?
Not required.
It's not required. This is something you choose to do.
Right, but we did check on what the obligation to pay any monies to them, that only kicks in should the referendum pass. So there's no, this is just filing our paperwork and getting all the documentation in order. There's no payment that happens until after the referendum passes, if it passes.
Yeah, if it passes. I saw that part, but I just wanted to know if that was a requirement or is something that you choose to do. And you said you choose to do that.
Yeah, so let's back.
That's okay.
So we choose to do it now rather than later, right? But I can interpret your question differently. Do you need to have it at all? Or can you
Yeah.
forego it, right? It's a different question. So what's the reason why we need the financial advisor for the referendum?
Well, they do a lot of preliminary report in terms of doing the calculation on the tax impact to the homeowners. Then they are part of putting the marketing together for the referendum to go, or for the bond dollars to go out to the market.
Not, when you say marketing, though, it's not marketing for Verona, it's marketing to
bond.
Their job
yeah,
is to sell the bonds.
to sell the bonds. Okay.
Right. Now, the reason why that's important to do, so you could not do that, the reason why it's important to do it is because the nature of these bonds is through a bid process. So if they're not marketed properly and you don't get bids, you get the high bid, and the bid is on the interest rate that people will pay you for the bond. So
Right.
you want a competitive low bid.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, let's open up with Mr. Vinci then, and our audit report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening to the board and the administration. My firm, Lurch, Vinci and Higgins, has provided 2 reports to the Board of Education, both regarding the 2012-13 school year. The first report is a comprehensive annual financial report, and the second report would be the Auditor's Management Report. We have reviewed both reports with the Finance Committee and the administration. For the public, the last 3 pages of your agenda actually includes excerpts from both reports. Maybe if I could just spend a couple minutes on the first page of the synopsis, which is your balance sheet as of June 30th, just to give you an overview of your financial condition. At the end of June, the board, in your general fund, which is your main budgetary account, if you have your synopsis, it's the first page. If you have,
You know what, they have the management report and the public has the synopsis.
oh, okay.
Are they up there?
I'm not sure if there's additional copies up there or not.
Not, we'll go get it.
Or is it? Is that what I'm looking at? Okay. I think I've got it.
If the board has the actual comprehensive annual financial report, it's page 20 of the document.
The balance sheet?
Yes. Okay, focusing on the general fund, which is the fund that maintains your operating expenses, your budgetary accounts, salaries, other expenses, tuition, so on and so forth. At the end of June, the board had approximately $1 million of cash. Offsetting the cash itself, you actually have about the same amount of money of surplus fund balance. Just to give the board an understanding of the various components of your fund balance, you have money set aside. If you remember a few years ago, the state limits how much a Board of Education is allowed to have as surplus. So there are 2 excess surplus amounts. The first amount is the amount of money that was determined as of 6/30/12, and it's an amount of $204,000. That amount of money has been used in the 13-14 budget. The second amount that's within your fund balance category of excess surplus of $274, that's the amount of money that needs to be earmarked in your 14-15 budget. There's a 2-year delay by the time the audit's submitted and your budget is then approved.
I'm sorry, guys, you said the 204 is in the 13-14. It's
Correct,
carried into 13-14.
correct.
The 274 is the skip year. That's
Is the amount that you need to include in your next school year budget, 14-15. The capital reserve that the board created has approximately $90,000 remaining.
as of June 30th.
This is all as of June 30th. And the board actually created a maintenance reserve in June of 2013, and there is $150,000 in that reserve. What is left is what we call unassigned. That's $313,000. That money is available for balancing a future budget for unforeseen expenses. But keep in mind how the state has changed their accounting. This does not include the state aid that the state held back in the month of June. You collected that in July. Since that was delayed by the state, we're, as accountants, not allowed to accrue that as a receivable. That actually is $270,000. So this balance sheet is on what we call a generally accepted accounting principles basis. There is no receivable from the state, and thus there is no amount of money in your surplus. On a budgetary basis, which is how the state evaluates the financial condition of school districts, they would have accounted for that, all right? And that would have then increased your unassigned surplus by another $270,000. Questions on the financials before I touch on the recommendations? The last page of the synopsis.
Just a quick question. If we move money into capital reserve prior to the end, would that then not be carried over to the next year as part of the next year's budget?
No, the money that's set aside into capital reserve stays in that account. It is used to fund projects that are in your long-range facility plan. You're allowed to accumulate monies in that account as long as you do not exceed your costs that are included in that long-range facility plan.
So if we had put the 204,982 into capital reserve ahead of time, it wouldn't have been part of next year's budget, essentially.
Correct. And the only time you can do that is in the month of June. The audit included 4 recommendations, which is the last page of the synopsis, and is also, if you have the management report, which is the second report, it would be the page 12 of that document. First item just dealt with the filing of applications for your carryover. We just noted that they were just past the statutory due date. Second finding deals with the purchasing procedures. During our test, we just noted that there were instances where it appears that services were rendered or materials were purchased prior to the issuance of a purchase order. It is our recommendation that the purchase orders be issued prior to the solicitation of any services by a outside vendor. The third recommendation third and fourth actually deal with your food service fund, the cafeteria operation. The cafeteria operation ended the year with a slight loss. We're just suggesting that that fund be monitored to ensure that it is self-supporting, that there's at a minimum that you do have a break even. And the last recommendation just dealt with the collections. I know the board has an outside management company that manages your food service operations, but we still test those records, and we just noted that receipts were not always timely deposited, and we also noticed that the amount that was reported on their revenue/daily cash report didn't always agree with the amount deposited. And we take a sample throughout the year. It's not where we test every transaction, but we just felt that it was important to bring that to the administration as well as the board's attention.
So, question, on the audit finding for purchase orders, what was the extent of
They
the purchase
do a sample of the entire budget, so the budget's 30 million, and then they sample the purchase orders, so, in the ones that they found, it came out to like 0.002% of the 30 million. So there are instances where, there's emergencies where there were somewhere buildings and grounds where they had to run to the store because, the plumbing got backed up. There's other instances where we use this company to advertise for jobs in the newspaper, and so the ad is submitted, and then the purchase order was done after that. So it's just kind of, just tightening up things here and there. And, we put a note out to the principals and the supervisors that, that has to be monitored, and the staff is, very good about that, so.
I think when you look at the testing, I don't think they were anywhere near materiality. So I think it was just isolated instances, but we just saw, enough that, again, that we felt that the procedures should be tightened slightly.
But is it safe to say that in any given year, some of the things that are the kinds of things that Ms. Lardino's talking about, the nature of those things would be acceptable, or just having one of them would be considered an audit?
No, one would not be an audit finding. I think if it's a situation where there is an emergency within the district, it's a matter that then the individual who is responsible for that department file a statement of emergency with the business office, summarizing then the issue at stake, and that you may not then be able to go out to bidding because of the dollar amount. But as long as you have a statement filed, then we would accept that, because that basically allows then that manager, that supervisor, to go ahead and take care of the need.
So then, under the corrective action, it can either be what's listed here, which is do the purchase order in advance, or file a statement of emergency with it. Right? Either one of those would.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, and just one item I've just neglected to bring to your attention. The opinion we rendered on your financials was unmodified, which is a clean opinion, which is the highest opinion that an auditor can give your financial statement. So just want to commend the business office for their, their efforts. Questions from the board?
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Have a good
Gary.
holiday.
Okay, same to all.
Okay, next on the agenda is Mr. Forte will do the HIB report.
This is the halfway point report. This new legislation came in 11-12, and then we reported it in 11-12, reported it in 12-13, and now we do our half-year report in 13-14. So in the year 2011-12, when the law first came about, there were 27 cases investigated district-wide, and we had 10 confirmed cases of HIB. In 2012-13, there were 10 cases investigated and 4 confirmed cases of HIB. And in this year, up until December 10th, which is today, there were 5 cases investigated and 0 confirmed cases of HIB district-wide. According to this new legislation, we also have to give ourselves a grade. There's 2 pieces to that. The first one is we do a self-reporting score, and our self-reporting score to the state was 91.5%. We have not received our overall grade from the Department of Education yet, which will have to be posted on our website. Some of the things we do to prevent HIB district-wide would be we have a peer leadership program where the high school upperclassmen mentor some freshmen. We have the Star Club where the elementary and high school students are working together. Heroes and Cool Kids is middle school and high school students. We have Lunch Bunch in the middle and high school. That's a social skills group. We also have Peace Pals in the elementary school where the upper grade students in the elementary school work with the lower level. And our training district-wide at new teacher orientation and the first day of building meetings, all teachers are made aware of all the procedures we have in place for HIB reporting, prevention, and so on. On November 5th, 2013, we also brought in a representative from Strauss Esme, who is our policymaker group, as well as the group that we confer with when we have HIB. They came in to do a training for all district personnel. And then also all our students, the first week of school, have an orientation with their administration from the school on HIB. So all these things, I think some of it has to do with the trainings and the attention that we've been giving it, but also the Commissioner of Education just gave his report on the status of the HIB program in the state, and there has been a dramatic decrease in the amount of HIB statewide. And some of that, I think, is attributed to the fact that we understand it a little better than we did in 2011-12 when it first came out. One of the things was many things were being considered HIB, were being considered bullying, when in fact it was just a disciplinary matter. So I think the fact that we brought attention to it, and we've also learned a little bit about it throughout the years, we've improved and seen substantial decrease from 27 cases up until this year. As of right now, we have 5 cases and 0 were confirmed. Again, 27 cases investigated and 10 confirmed in 11-12. Questions about HIB or anything to do with this? How we're handling it?
Just a question on what you said about the state. So the state is saying that there's a decline, but that's a decline in the number of cases found.
Correct.
And that comes after, that's in the first year since they issued the directive that said you guys are overly cautious on what you're reporting,
That was one of the findings, is that people were overly cautious.
meaning that they were over-reporting.
I think so,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
I can't speak for every district, but I think from what I've seen, that's the case.
How do you feel the implementation has gone so far in Verona, in terms of aligning all adults and staff to the roles and responsibilities?
I think we brought so much attention to it that everybody's so aware of it. I think it's improved. Obviously, I'm not sure if it's preventing every case, and I'm sure there's run-of-the-mill things going on still, but the difference was we were classifying some things or considering some things to be a bullying incident when it really was just a disciplinary incident, not necessarily bullying. It's a hard question because I don't know if I think that's why I said when I was reporting this is I think it's a combination of the two. One, that we brought attention to it, we trained people, we put some resources into it, but I also think we're getting better at it as we've been going along. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Okay, I don't think, do we have any discussion items for tonight? No. We could do committee reports. Education Committee met today. The agenda is on page 7 of the Education Committee report that everyone has. The highlights are we reviewed some staff medical leaves of various types and the coverage to address those. There was an update on the G&T District Committee that's reviewing the lower grade process on how we identify G&T students. We reviewed some preschool enrollment changes under the special education part of the agenda. And we reviewed Mr. Miller's draft presentation, which, on the curriculum update and academics update, which he's going to do in second meeting in January?
I believe second
Second meeting in January. There's also some upcoming curriculum content changes that will be on the agenda in January as well. Community Resources met today as well, and we reviewed the district fact book. We normally put the fact book out in late August, early September, with all going on with referendum, et cetera. It's taken much longer to get to this, but the board should have a copy as soon as Mr. Forte makes some minor changes to the document, just to make some parts easier to read for folks that are not as attuned to some of the terminology that we use around academics. Any questions about that? Athletics Committee?
Sure. So as John had noted earlier, the Falls Sports Award Dinner will be moved to a meeting in January, possibly the 21st. We have a pretty big update on the 7th with curriculum instruction in terms of our progress. So we'll be touching base with Gary just to see, and we'll let you know as soon as we know. We have a couple field trips coming up in the next few months. One is a French art trip to New York City. Another is a band trip to Boston. And then we have 2 indoor track meets that are taking place. And I'm just mentioning those because we had decided several months back that we wanted just to touch base on any trips that happen out of state. So one's in New York City at the Armory, and another one's at Rockland Community College. We have no update really on the cardiac screening exams yet. We're still awaiting further information from the state in terms of the legislation they passed to require this. And it's requiring us to do a screening on all students, or students in a certain grade. They haven't quite determined how they're going to move that progress forward, whether they start at a certain grade and all students thereafter, or all students. But it involves taking EKG report and ensuring that there aren't any issues, and also providing literature to parents about issues around cardiac arrest. We have 2 positions that are filled: the JV baseball coaching position, which we are approving Mitch Rosenhog tonight, and an AD admin assistant is on approval for tonight, which is Ms. Roddick. And then just kind of circling back to the cardiac screening, I'm going to touch base with Gary around what the specific legislation is to get kind of a broader update, because I know I've been kind of giving an update that there is no update yet from the state. So maybe even reach out to our representative just to see what their advice is around it, because I do mention it every 2 weeks that there's no update, so to say, but I'd like to kind of learn more at this point, since there hasn't really been movement on it. So this is also similar to the concussion screening we do. We ensure that there is no issue around students playing with a concussion, and we do provide that report back to parents, and parents can obviously say no. So it's similar to that same type of health requirement, but just around cardiac arrest. Any questions?
Just one thing I would add on regarding band, it's not it won't be a school trip, but I think it is something that's noteworthy about the Verona band. Mr. Lynch, the band director, has nominated a number of students up at the high school band to participate in, and I was looking through my phone for the proper name, and I can't remember the name of the organization, but there will be a number of Verona students, a small number of Verona students, who will join a traveling band through the summer that will tour, I think it's 6 countries in Europe, and participate in a band. They'll go away 4th of July. They'll go to Pennsylvania for 3 days to meet up with other band students. There's about 150 students altogether from Florida, Georgia, New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, I believe. They'll practice for 3 days. They'll get the music ahead of time. They'll convene, and they'll live on a campus in Pennsylvania for 3 days. Then they get on a flight to Switzerland. From Switzerland, they'll go to Belgium. From Belgium, they'll go to Germany. From Germany, they'll go to Austria. From Austria, they go to back to Germany, through France, Switzerland, and home. I think they're still finalizing the total number of students to go, but there'll be a small number of students representing Verona on that trip. Buildings and grounds?
Yes, there was a Buildings and Grounds meeting today, part of it by telephone. But before we get into the what specifically happened at the Buildings and Grounds Committee, I don't know that any public information has been released on the ROD grants locally or not. I know we received some information on it, but I don't know that anything was posted locally. Was there to anybody's know? Where is it? My Verona. It is on My Verona. All right. So what we did find out was that I don't have the exact figure of all of the projects that we submitted, but the total project cost of the projects that they accepted as meeting the criteria for the ROD grants was $8,911,004. And of that, the state's share that they will fund is $3,564,402. So we did get good news recently from the state that even with the number of applications that they did receive, and it was a fair number, although I think it was less than what we had heard. 331 districts across the state applied for ROD grants. There are 1,538 projects, and there was a cost of $1.1 billion. The state's share is going to be $507 million. And of that, we're going to get $3,564,402 to apply to the projects that they have accepted. There's a little bit of a complication here in that part of what they accepted was some improvements in the district that are covered under the ESIP project. And we're going to have to decide how we're going to balance that. There was some discussion about it at today's meeting, Buildings and Grounds meeting. But I'm not sure that we have our full arms around the concept yet. Again, we're looking to replace boilers in the high school, and we're looking to improve the heating, HVAC systems in the high school specifically, which would be covered under the ESIP. But it's also part of the grant applications that we submitted. So we're going to have to see how we dovetail these two together. The fact that we have a commitment from the state at this point in time of $3.5 million on whatever the referendum, the cost of the referendum that we eventually decide to go forward with. The last time we talked about it was at the last meeting, and we were somewhere in the neighborhood of between $16 and $17 million. Now that number may change as we get closer to the referendum and things start to get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of what exactly is going into the referendum. We can't add to the referendum anything that at least in the portion that the state has approved, that isn't already there. And of course, what we've said over and over again is that nothing was submitted to the state with regard to the reclamation of the field. So that's good news. $3.5 million coming our way, which will decrease whatever we thought the referendum was. And if we just take last meeting's numbers of 16 million, and we do everything that we said we were going to do, or at least we applied the state to do, that it could be we could have a referendum now in the neighborhood of about 13 million. But again, that'll be refined as we go along. I think that the thrust of what we talked about at the Buildings and Grounds meeting is how to move forward at this point in time. Since we've heard from the state, and we have, and one of the key elements of the referendum is security. There was a security committee meeting that took place about a week ago, I would say, made up of various parties, including some citizens, some school administrators, Mr. McDevitt, board members, myself, and Mr. Spardell, in which we looked over the security plans that have been formulated so far. And attending the meeting was a local resident who happens to be affiliated with a security firm that performs security audits. And what the committee decided to do, to recommend to the board, is that we move forward with, and again, this is what Mr. Odiola was talking about earlier, is that to retain this firm to look at the plans that we have put together locally. And they were put together by various people, including the chief of police, including our Buildings and Grounds director, principals, and Mr. Forte, and to give us an evaluation of that plan. Are we hitting the points that we should be hitting? And if we aren't, what's not in it that should be in it, and what perhaps is in it that shouldn't be in it? We talked about at the last meeting there being somewhere in the neighborhood of 280 to 290 cameras. Do we actually need 280 or 290 cameras? Well, this company does this for a living. This is what they do. And security audits can be very costly. I worked in a district last year that spent, in a district with one building, spent $20,000 on a security audit. So that's the magnitude of what we could have been talking about. But because we have sort of an in with a citizen, he has gotten his company to provide us with a proposal that will cost us $5,000. So that's about 25% of what one district paid for one building, and he's going to do the complete review of all the plans for all the buildings. And it's on the agenda for tonight. But again, those are that was a key element of the referendum going forward. We did talk about that. And the Buildings and Grounds Committee, we also talked about the ESIP itself, and we've put together an RFP, and we are going to go out and a request for proposal on companies that provide services, HVAC services, and we'll look forward to getting a response from our RFP. But again, we've got to come to some sort of a decision as to which direction we're going to go. Are we going to go with the ESIP, or are we going to go with the ROD grant? What makes more sense to do? Supposedly these ESIPs are budget neutral in that what you pay, you will get back in savings. But that doesn't mean that we have to pay it. I mean, it doesn't, there's no requirement that 100% of what it costs us to do this comes from us. If the state wants to give us some money, I'm not sure that there isn't a way that we can dovetail these two together and move forward and have one support the other, have the state fund support the other. And again, I don't know the mechanics of that, and I think that we need to look into that, since we're at a critical point now where we've got to decide what we're going to do here with a referendum in a very short period of time. And perhaps we ought to discuss it tonight, even though Mr. Spardell is not here. With the deadlines looming for a March referendum, we've got to make a decision. I think the deadline on that was June, I'm sorry, June. I wish it was June. If it was June, we wouldn't have a problem. January the 13th. Our next meeting is January the 7th. If we intend to go to referendum in March, then we've got to pass a resolution at our next meeting as to whether or not we're going forward with it. And we really didn't have a discussion about that because Mr. Spardell was not there. I would be in favor of that, but I think that at this point in time that we need to have a discussion as to where we think we want to go and what we want to do with the referendum.
So, the numbers that from the last meeting were somewhere between 16 and 19 million for the total referendum, right?
Well, I think we had narrowed it down to between 16 and 17, I thought.
Okay, so let's say 16 to 17, right? Let's say 16, let's just make it simple, let's say 16. Then 8.9 of that was the level 1 work that qualifies for the ROD, right? And then the ROD subsidizes 40% of the 8.9. So in order to get the ROD, the taxpayer in Verona has to vote for the other 60% of the spend. And then there's a little over $7 million that makes up the rest of the balance to get to 16, right? So it's 8.9 plus 7.1. Of the 8.9, 40% is ROD grant, and the other 60% of the 8.9 the voter pays for. So if we took the state money, for every dollar that we spent on what would qualify for ESIP, the taxpayer would be on the hook for 60 cents of every dollar. If we went ESIP for the whole thing, then ESIP pays for itself, doesn't it?
Well, it pays for itself, but there's an out-of-pocket cost to that. I mean, it doesn't pay for itself the day you install the equipment. It pays for itself over the life of the equipment that you're putting in. I mean, supposedly there's a return that comes for you from energy savings. Now, the energy savings, you don't recover that first
No, that goes.
month. You don't recover in the first year.
No, that goes to the firm that's funding the.
That's right. So
so-
we have to pay for it.
Right,
But-
which is part of our tax base today. It wouldn't increase tax, like to go the bond route, the 60% that the voter pays for is gonna be an increase in tax, whereas the ESIP would be no increase to tax, because it's part of our current spend rate for,
That's right.
depending on what the ESIP is. Did you guys have any dialogue on what will be in the ESIP? Because I thought a year ago, Mr. McDevitt looked into ESIP for the boilers and the heating, and they couldn't get somebody, I forget what the firm was, if it was, Train said it
All right, but
it
they've been,
didn't make financial
somehow
sense to do it.
Honeywell's
Is it-
name came up today, and I don't really know why. to tell you the
Train
truth.
and Honeywell, these are the different companies that do it.
Yeah, they're the big players in the game, Honeywell, Train.
But at the time, the only thing that qualified for ESIP was lighting, right? But not the heating or the boilers or anything like that. So what would be in the ESIP that we would be voting on in January?
Well, I don't
what-
know. You're gonna have to
It
ask
could have
Mr.
more than
McDevitt that.
yeah. The lighting is like where they said you're gonna get your most bang for your buck, but
Right.
there are other things that they said they're gonna include. I mean, even things like a door. So right now, it's all coming together. You know, we talked to Mr. McDevitt about it today. There's an RFP we have to put out for a firm to come in and finalize it. This is just the process we're going through.
Yeah,
with
the
this.
ESIP, the return that's going to cover the cost comes from the lighting, but it didn't confine itself to only the lighting. The ESIP is gonna cover other things, including the boilers. It's just that the savings, the significant amount of savings that's needed to cover the full cost of the project, almost all of it's gonna come from the lighting. Some of it will come from the efficiency of the boilers themselves, but the big savings is gonna be through the lighting, and that's gonna carry the project in terms
So
of
they're
it
saying with
being
the
cost
savings
neutral.
from installing lighting, we would be able to pay for boilers.
From what that's what they said. That was the part of the audit, or that we had done earlier, is that they said that's,
Yeah, I recalled it that it was, we could not pay for the boilers, but if that changed, or if I'm
Yeah.
mistaken, then,
That may have changed.
Then-
Originally, that was not the plan, but I haven't participated in the Buildings and Grounds meeting since Mr. Spardell took over in that spot. But originally, that boilers were not covered.
in the ESIP.
Right.
That's how I
lighting.
remember it.
It was lighting.
All right,
Almost
so in
exclusively.
any case, right,
But it
today
could
we're saying
change
that they're
in the
gonna go,
last 6
so we're
weeks,
saying
it could
some combination of two firms, or maybe more, are gonna go and take a look at what we have in the level 1, and to see if we can do it in an ESIP. But just the back of a napkin tells me, if ESIP would carry it, why give 60 cents of tax increase for every dollar to the voter when ESIP would pay for the
Because
whole
you're
thing?
gonna have to pay for it, because you have to pay for the equipment. We would have to go out on a lease purchase to purchase all the boiler equipment. This is gonna pay for the boiler equipment. We would still have to somehow buy the equipment. Like I said, this savings doesn't come instantaneously. So you'd have to go out on a 5-year lease purchase, and you'd have to put that cost of that into your budget somewhere.
So what does the ESIP pay the Honeywell back for? In other words, if we buy the equipment, then what money am I giving to Honeywell in the future?
You're gonna pay for them out of your budget, but supposedly you're gonna recover it every year from the savings of the lighting. Like if it's gonna cost $1 million for the equipment, you're gonna go out and get a lease purchase to buy that $1 million worth of equipment that you're gonna pay off over 5 years.
Right. And then I save, and then because I'm consuming less energy, for
Because of the
example.
savings in the lighting, as you pay it over 5 years, you're gonna save it in lighting.
So what does Honeywell do for me then in that? Because if I had an old refrigerator and I went out and bought a new refrigerator and then it pays for itself in 10 years because I use less
They're gonna
electricity.
they're gonna
I thought they
guarantee
did the
it. Part of the ESIP is a guarantee. They guarantee
A
that you
certain
will
amount of
save it.
savings.
And
I
if
thought
you
we-
don't save it, they're supposed to come up with the money at the end. I haven't seen them do that yet.
But I thought Honeywell was doing the audit, energy audit for us. They were the ones that were looking through the district to find the savings. That was my understanding.
The company we used was called Dome Tech. That was for the first round. The second round will be with a company like a Train. So what I'm gathering from this, from Mr. McDevitt, is that there's 2 levels of audits. The first audit is the one that was paid for by the BPU, the 25,000. That was by Dome Tech. Dome Tech comes in and says whether or not it's worthwhile pursuing. The next level is to go to a Train or a Honeywell.
I think part of what what I remember Mr. McDevitt saying is that he did talk to Mr. Spardell, and I think what we talked about doing is that putting it all into the referendum. If the ESIP does cover it, we don't have to spend the money, even though we put it into the referendum. If it's more beneficial to follow the ESIP, then we would not spend that money. We would not spend the money through the referendum. We wouldn't spend the state's money either.
So if we don't, I guess, I don't know, and we could go, I just have to feel sharper about the math on this, right? Because if I don't, it strikes me that if I don't spend the state's money, then how do I shouldn't spend the 60 cents from the taxpayer either.
Well,
right?
but you're gonna have to do that, though. You have to do that, whether you spend it through the referendum or whether you spend it through the ESIP. That's why I'm saying, I think you should leave it in the referendum, or find a way so that the two will come together. That if you can get the state's money to pay for 40% of it, you're only gonna have to put 60% out of your pocket, and you're gonna recover 100% of the cost. So you're gonna not only recover your money, you're gonna recover the state's money too, if that's the case.
But how much of the rod is ESIP? What
Yeah, that's
percentage?
the thing.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
Mr. McDevitt's gonna have to answer that, because I don't know.
That's all the stuff that our engineers are coming up with now. They said they felt confident that they can have all this ready for when the deadline is, when we have to vote on it and be ready to have a referendum, that they'll know when all of it comes together. But it is a fairly complicated thing that we're putting these two things together.
There is no vote. I'm glad they feel confident, but if they don't have the numbers prepared, then there's
What am I
nothing to
voting
vote
on?
Right.
I just want it to be one of those, I gotta vote on it, and then later I'll find out what's in it. Like,
I think we were all pretty much aware that there were a couple pieces here, a couple moving pieces that are all coming together. And, we're trying to get it to the point where we're gonna know exact things, but you have different engineers, a couple different engineering firms, and the ESIP program all working together.
Well, again, if we're planning to have a March referendum, then we need to know what we're doing by our next meeting.
Correct.
We have to,
There was in the notes for buildings and grounds, there was another estimate coming in for for the field, and this is today's agenda, right, the 10th? Says, for sake of comparison, they'll be providing a cost estimate and a conceptual plan for the lower field, and then there's an alternate proposal for the current
For the
field.
upper field, correct.
Right, did we get that yet?
Yes. That was sent to.
That's the one that
everyone.
came out the other day, that's
Right.
not changing again.
No. That's the
Well,
same.
again, to that point is that we had one estimate that put it somewhere around 5.9 million for the field. But now
Field and the stuff and the stuff by the tennis courts, correct, 5.9.
All right, and now we have a second opinion or a second estimate from French and Perillo that says that cost is more like 4.2 million. So, and I'm inclined to believe that, frankly, because I think that 5.9 was high. And especially when you consider the type of work, a majority of the type of work that needs to be done out there is something that comes under French and Perillo, although not all of it, but some of it. So if we believe their estimate, then the recovery of the field and the full rehabilitation of the field was more like 4.2 million.
Now, that doesn't include parking lot and tennis
It
court.
does include
It
the
does, oh,
parking.
good,
It
then,
includes the
yeah.
parking lot and the tennis court, which is,
I just have some reservations if it doesn't.
yeah, we
I
talked
would
about
need-
taking it out at the last meeting. That was part of what they took out of, to get us from the 19 million to the 16 million. They took out the tennis court and the parking lot, but at 4.2 million, they're saying that covers it,
But
includes
that's
the
like,
parking lot.
yeah, I just feel like we take out the tennis courts in the parking lot, it's similar to taking out the drainage at HVW when we had issues. I feel like that's, if we're gonna do it, we should do the whole thing correctly. And
So what I have there's 4 components of the plan. There's the building remediation, there's security, there's the field and technology. For the buildings, we got the ESIP question to resolve. For security, we've got the audit recommendations to resolve. For the field, we've got is the parking lot in or out, and we've got 2 estimates that differ by 25%, which is a lot of money. And then, is there anything outstanding on the technology portion of things?
Not the regular technology, but the security technology.
For the cameras?
For the
Right,
cameras
I
and
got
things
that
like
on the
that.
security, but that's.
Right.
But for the technology itself, the question that I had at the when they did the presentation, what was it, 2 meetings ago, last meeting on the network, the question was, I recognize that we need to increase it for park. And we were gonna go off and try to determine how we were going to fund or plan for the number of devices that we need, the desktop device, or the end user devices.
Like laptops or whatever, right?
Yeah, like as part of that, and then how does and the second part of the question was some sense of what happens the other, 165 days of the year, right? There's 2 weeks of park that you'd have to be prepared for, but how does that network benefit us for the rest of the school year, right?
Well, one of the things I think,
I'm just saying, like, that's
Sure.
gotta be bundled together with I just feel like there's a lot of moving pieces on this, and it's gonna be difficult to vote on it without understanding what we're packaging together. On the lower field, just the 25% difference in change, what is that, I mean, my sense is that I would question the other estimates then.
on the lower, you mean the upper field, right?
Yeah, on the upper field, there's
Okay.
the estimate, what Joe was just saying is that we just got another estimate from another engineering firm that's 25% less, right? Is that,
Well, that's French and
French and
Perillo.
yeah, so what does that say about the other estimates for the rest of the
Well, we've
16
been
million?
talking about that for a while now. I mean, that's something that's bothered us for a period of time,
Oh,
and you can
months.
attest to that.
Since, yeah.
Is
from
that
July
a
when I
lot of the estimates
are
that we've been
inflated.
getting, we felt have been excessive. And that's why when we looked at the 19 million, what they took it, to get from the 19 million to the 16 million, they specifically, Mr. McDevitt specifically went to projects he thought were overestimated. And he said, let's not even consider those.
And the reason he thought they were overestimated is because he had gotten quotes for these projects
Correct.
already.
So, to some extent, this has been an ongoing problem here. But, you know, when push comes to shove, if we're gonna go out and move on this project, we can carve out any portion of it we want to and give that portion to whomever we want to. So if EI comes in here and says it's 5.9, and French Apparel says it's only 4.2, we give it to French Apparel. I mean, it's not that here all eggs have to go into one basket, and they're just gonna have to understand.
Well,
But
ultimately,
this
too,
is
the
just
bids
a-
will determine what the actual cost is. I mean,
The-
this is
the-
just, yeah.
Right, these are
This
just
is
engineering estimates.
Right.
As far as the actual
When
work
you
is
go to
concerned, we
bid,
go out to bid, and whoever
they
bids
come
on it
back.
comes back. But we're even talking about who's gonna oversee the project. I mean, even to oversee the project, we might say, look, you know, at this point in time, it makes more sense to go with French and Perillo for that part of the project. There's no reason why you can't do that. I mean,
But just because you go for a lower bid, though, doesn't mean that it's going to cost less.
no,
It
I
ended
mean,
up
you know,
costing
again, these are
as
just
much
cost
as it
estimates.
could.
I mean,
This is just estimates to determine how
it
much
could come
money
in
needs to raise.
It could come in 7 million, it could come in 3 million. I
But
mean,
we need these estimates to put together a number to put on the ballot.
But I mean, they gave us a very detailed cost estimate, and looking at it, it's, you know, much different than what we had from EI, $4,112,000. He's got everything down here, including the tennis courts, including additional parking lot, and,
I believe there's one difference between the French and Perillo and the EI was that some of the fees associated aren't in that 4.1 as compared to the other. So it's really more like 4.5 compared to 5.9.
well, they have a contingency in here, so I don't know what fees they might be, but,
And that's really where we felt that the contingencies were overinflated.
well, the contingencies, they told us was 25%.
We felt, Joe and I have felt, and we've communicated this since, you know, literally going back to June,
Right.
July, that their contingencies were overinflated.
All right, French
And
Apparel,
we expressed our concerns with them.
French Apparel says the contingency is 10%, which is more in
In line.
keeping, in line with what I'm accustomed to.
And what we did,
also.
and the last time we did it, it's in keeping with that. They were just insisting that, despite our insistence that it was too high, that's what they needed to feel comfortable. And the pushback is that you guys could, you know, be a little sharper. You know, anybody can come up with a number. It's not hard, you know, you can come up with it looks like that's a $10 million project. You know, all right, based on what? That, you know, if you gave yourself a 40% contingency, which is almost what they did when you added all the soft costs, you know, it's not hard to come up with these, and that's why we kept pushing back, saying you've got to come in closer to
And how much is the parking lot and the tennis? Because at the last meeting, I asked the gentleman that was here from Mylan or EI if the parking lot was, and he said, no, it was taken out. And I was saying it's back in?
Yeah, parking lot, additional parking lot, $72,000. This says new tennis court. I don't know, I'm hoping that's all of them, although it says quantity one, because we were talking about redoing all of the tennis courts.
Yeah, well, we'd have to, because if we don't, and we were to utilize that land in the future, we'd have to technically
Oh, wait, no.
test all over
So
again and
wait a
remediate.
W says restoration of 4.
I know, it
X
says
says new tennis
restoration of
courts.
existing 4 tennis courts and 1 new tennis court. Well, that could be a significant difference, though. They're saying that just to do a restoration of the 4, $75,000. The new tennis court would be $85,000. Whereas I think with EI, they said that they would do all 5 would be just all new tennis courts. So that's a difference between one proposal and the other proposal. So there's, yeah, we're gonna have to reconcile that. Because EI said, no, it doesn't pay to have 1 new tennis court. I think they said that they would just tear up what's there and start over, put in 5. So that's where we're at.
We didn't get any update yet on the cost of the stadium, in a sense, for the upper field. We didn't get, I know last meeting we were waiting to find out what that cost is. So say it cost, $2 million to remediate it, what's the additional cost to put the football field on it with bleachers and press and everything else? Do we have that number?
For the upper field,
Yeah.
I mean, I only have what Friendship Perillo said here. So
Mike, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what's the cost for just the field, like the stadium, like the field, the bleachers?
When you mean the stadium, you don't mean the bleachers, right?
I
He
do. I mean,
means
like,
what's the
you gotta
cost
take it all out, right?
If you take
to
the
put it back in.
5.9 million and you don't do the tennis courts and the parking lot.
It was 5.4.
No, I'm saying you do all that. I'm saying what's the cost of just the upper field, putting the football field back in there? What's that cost?
Just putting it back in there without doing anything else?
What do you mean, putting it back in there?
Because with this current proposal, we're putting in the turf field, putting the bleachers on the upper field. What's that cost? We're still kind of waiting for that number to come back. One day it was 600,000, it was 1 point something.
well, this says 573,000 for a turf field.
That's just for the turf.
So the project is to do the deep compaction.
Yeah.
The compaction, right?
Yep.
Replace the bleachers,
Yes.
right? You've got to put a surface on top of it.
Yep.
Put the retaining wall up.
Yep.
There's electricity, lighting, and then you put either grass or synthetic turf.
Yeah,
The
I'm wondering what's the cost of, not for any argument's sake, but just what's the cost of the lighting, the bleachers, and the turf and all that on top of it?
On top of,
The new.
so you want to see
compacted.
the breakdown of what's the compaction cost, what is filling it in cost, what is I don't know if there's a.
This is pretty,
I don't
it's
think it-
pretty detailed, this thing, right? I mean, it tells you
Well,
detail,
it says-
compaction and all that. I mean, I think it's,
It's in the, it's in the list.
is this good?
Yeah, that breaks it down.
This thing that I sent you guys, you wanna look at this, Mike?
Yeah.
This was from French and Pearl.
But if you add up,
This is the updated one, right?
I'm just not sure I follow what you're asking to take out. So essentially, it's remediate the field
Mhm.
and/or the parking lot and tennis courts,
Yeah, if we did, yeah.
right? So if you take out the parking lot and tennis courts, it takes out X dollars.
No, I'm saying if you were just to remediate the field, if you were just to fix the problem and put it back to a grass field, what's that cost?
It's everything that you have there except for,
Except
instead
for
of-
the
instead of
field,
five-
this is-
instead of 500, you'd save about $200,000 in the whole thing net.
Well,
Two to
the field's
300,000.
500 itself.
No, but you have to
But then you
replace
have
that
to-
number with the grass
You
and
have
the
to-
drainage. and
Right,
everything
and
else.
the drainage and the sprinkler system, and then increasing the amount of fill. Because a turf
so we
field
don't
only
have a-
needs 1 foot of fill, the other, regular grass field needs 2 feet of fill. So it was, in the end, it was about a $200,000 difference is what we were told.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think that we need to come to some sort of consensus as to what, do we want to move forward at this point in time to try and approve a referendum for March?
Well, I'd like to get resolution on I'd like to know what's in the plan. Right now, it's still sort of volatile, right? I'm not sure what I'd be voting on.
I think the ESIP and the security, I think with this, you're pretty set though, right? You pretty much get what that is. Whether or not we don't want to do it is a different story, but I think you pretty much have detail, right, on what exactly you get, right?
Well, how much so let's just make it simple, so how much money am I talking about total? 16 million? Is that what I'm voting on?
Approximately, I didn't add all of it exactly up like that because we're still deciding on which, if we're gonna go with French and Perillo or EI, or now there was talk about doing the lower field the other day, so we're getting
I guess the question is, one of these decisions will be made if you're gonna vote on this on the 7th.
What am I voting on?
Right. I
Right,
don't
so if
know
I'm
how
voting on either the lower field, the upper field, 5.9 million,
there's
with or without tennis
no more
courts
meetings
or less.
between now and
Yeah.
your next
right?
meeting.
On the security, I'm voting on the security plan, plus or minus any changes that the audit comes up with in
I don't know how
January.
you- I don't know how you do it, but
I'm just, on the buildings,
know how
I'm
we can
I'm
resolution.
including, I'm gonna vote on the building plan with or without the ESIP, but I'm not sure what's in the ESIP. I mean, I think my sense is where we are is we've got more, certainly more wood to chop to get these things answered, right? That's one. Two, we know we've secured the ROD grant, and that's good for 18 months from Jan 1, so that goes out until June of 2015.
Correct.
Right? Our aspiration is to put it to the voter in March. That's still possible, but it would require that we have a board resolution sometime by the end of January on what exactly we're going to put in front of the voter, in some way that the board can confidently vote on it, because that's the timeline to get the,
What's the
to
deadline,
get the,
Joe?
think it was-
Well, I thought they said January
January.
13th, because I think the
60 days.
the date, what's the date in March? Is it the 3rd? Maybe, it might be the 21st of March, but somewhere I remember the January 13th.
timeline from Andrea Kahn.
What's that?
We had it on the timeline that we got from Andrea.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, when we talked
Second
about this a
week in
couple months ago,
January.
this was a meeting we were supposed to vote on this. It was supposed to be tonight.
yeah, but we also thought we were going to get estimates
I-
in June.
Agreed. I completely
Well,
agree.
why don't we leave it this way? It'll be up to the Buildings and Grounds Committee to put together all the numbers that are necessary by January the 7th, if we can. And if we can't, we can't.
But I think there's two parts of it, Joe. I think that's certainly one thing, and the second part of it is, what am I buying? Like, when it comes to security, what am I getting that's improving security, or what am I not doing that,
Well, I think that
that's the,
part of the list that they gave us when they were here, I think we have enough of that detail as to what we're buying. I think we have that. If you go back and look at, I mean, we're buying cameras, we're buying, now, as far as technology goes, I think we quantified that at the last meeting. I mean, there's a whole list of stuff that we have.
Although at the last meeting, I did push for the audit to come in for security, because I had the same concern as John,
All right,
so
now
to say, which
that's-
was, what are we really buying on it?
Where that we may not have in terms of, we'll know what we think it should be in the security. Do we know what they think we should have? And if we have 290 cameras, it's impossible to think that they're gonna come up with more. So, in that case, we may have more than we need in that regard. And we would have the time, if we decide to do this, if we decide to vote on January 7th to go forward, and we have enough detail to satisfy everybody, that we would maybe have some overkill with regard to the security in there. Because it doesn't seem that it's gonna be higher than that. It's gonna be lower than that. We could always back that out at some point in time, or to go to some other phase of security that we haven't thought of, as long as it comes under the umbrella of security. So if we have the cost of a Cadillac and it only comes in the cost of a Buick, then maybe we'll look to something that we might want to do extra, or to drop that out.
if we, so if we did this in March and it passed, when would we start doing work?
They said most likely late summer, early fall we'd be able to do it. Which is tough because now you have students. So some of the things won't be able to be started with students in the building.
Would we be working on the field in the winter?
It depends
That's
on,
possible.
it depends on what part we will be doing. The compaction could be done, probably. It's not likely you would get the field installed in the winter, because the compaction is gonna take time. Once you get into cold weather, I don't think that you can put the field in past November the 1st. So a part of it may be started, but it certainly would not be ready for the installation of a field in the fall. That would have to come in the spring and in the summer. But some part of it could be started. I don't understand why it would not be able to start.
But I would not have a usable field for September, October,
Well,
November.
I don't know that. I'm not sure. If they can do the compaction in the fall,
You're talking about for 2015 football
I'm saying,
season?
I'm just thinking, like, if I'm faced with starting in the fall, late summer, early fall, school's in session, so I'm limited in what I could do. And if I, given the bidding process and everything else, permits and everything, and even for the field, you start working on the field in late summer, early fall, it will be ready for the following spring
Right.
slash,
I,
right, so I'm
even
just
if
thinking,
you
why,
weren't be able to start on the field in the fall, if you start when cold weather breaks in the middle of March, you have March till the end of August. I don't
But you've
see
got
why you would not be able to have a field by September the 1st. That's April, May, June, July, that's 5 months. It doesn't take 5 months to put in a field.
Just wondering why we would. Well, let's do this. Look, at the end of the day, the two choices are push this through and be aggressive and get to a March vote, or get all the facts in more completely and do a September vote, right? Those are I think that's the two dates, right? Because you can't
There's
do.
no other date,
You
right?
can't do the. you
Can't do
the-
April
The
or
April,
June or
the
any of
April
that,
date.
right.
So, my personal view is that it's still difficult for me to understand what I'm buying and what the options and benefits are. That's one. And secondly, I think we need to spend some time, like we did last time, getting public input and explain to the public what we're proposing here before we finalize it. It would just be odd to me, after all we've done as a board, to vote on it and then take public comment on it. It's sort of, then I voted on it
Yeah.
already, I just.
Yeah, and actually, John, the questions you were asking me before kind of helped me clarify in my head what I was trying to get at, which is if there's $1 million difference in the two field proposals, where is that $1 million situated? Is it situated in the deep dynamic
But-
compaction? Is it situated in the field? Right. That's
No, what Joe's saying is it may not be $1 million.
Or it might not be there at
other
all,
things that
right?
are not apples for apples in there too. Like it doesn't include all the tennis courts. One has 5 tennis courts,
And
the other has
that's-
4 or whatever. Or
right.
one has 1 and one has 5. That's. I
So I
don't know
think
what that
yeah.
costs, right?
So with the
That's
questions, yeah. So exactly that, and then that's what I was trying to get at. So it clicked for a second. I was like, oh yeah, that's the point, right?
So what's the next, for Buildings and Grounds Committee, what's the next
Well,
thing that's
it
gonna happen? Is
depends on the guidance from the board here. If you think that it's not reasonable to have a March vote because we don't have enough information, then the whole, the whole project, actually the whole mission of the Buildings and Grounds Company becomes quite different. If you're saying, no, let's see how far we can get by January the 7th and see if we're comfortable with it, then we're going to have to put together all of the details that you think that are missing. I mean, and I think most of them are there.
Well, I think we should, so what I'm saying is, let's do that. Let's do the second thing, because what I'm hearing is that you feel that all the details are there, we just gotta write them all down, right? Okay,
I-
then write them all down, but can we do it so that I'm sensitive to other things going on?
Right.
I'd just rather not get it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the day of a board meeting.
Right.
Like, that's sort of messy to me. Anytime to just understand, like, it's a lot to go through, right? And I wanna make sure I understand, like, what we're doing and how it all fits together and what the benefits are and how, what's gonna be in the grant, what's gonna be in the ESIP, what are we going to the taxpayer for? And the other thing is, there's still open questions from the last time. Especially if we're talking about, there's an engineer now looking at doing the lower field as an option. Is that,
It was something we just asked them for a proposal on how much, what they thought the cost would be, an idea.
and then what would happen to the upper field if we did that?
Some of the discussion was around doing something else with it, like using the usable part for a practice area and then coming up with another solution for the part that wouldn't be usable because of the sinkhole problem. So you have to remediate it for the contaminant problem, but not for the sinkhole problem.
So what comes to mind for me is, as we have been looking at these estimates, is that my concern is that it's varied. So I'd be interested to see what is the cost to remediate it, and then with the lower field, if you're gonna, this is why I need to know the cost of the actual hard cost, because if you're gonna spend X amount of dollars to put just one field in at the upper field, when remediating it, if you can use that, if it's the same cost to just develop the whole lower field or facility and make it a multi-purpose facility on the lower field for the same cost as it would to remediate and field the upper one, then I have a concern there, right? Because these costs have obviously varied quite a bit, and that needs to be answered before we vote, right? Because I don't want to vote for something that I'm paying a lot to just replace what we have there, when in fact we could have a larger facility on the lower field and multi-purpose for the the same cost if we just made it a grass playground, then moved it all down to the lower field to create a really nice facility, right, for the cost of what it would cost to turf one football field. So, and that's kind of where my head's at now. Is that what is it just to fix it? Is my
Well,
question.
I'm not sure why we're looking at this again, to be perfectly honest. Well, I do know why, but
I,
we've been through this, and we've vetted this idea already. We are just revisiting this for really no good end. I mean, we have a plan that's in place, and I don't know why, frankly, there's any time.
Me
we
too.
waste on
I
this.
echo that. I echo that, because the estimate we had on the lower field was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million.
And we still have to address the.
And
upper
we still
field.
have to address the issue of remediating the
So,
upper field. If
we-
we want to
we've
do
done
anything
this.
at all on the other side of Sampson Drive with the tennis courts eventually, whether putting in a new tennis court or building a parking lot, we have to remediate ground. And we've heard from the experts that they won't allow us to remediate a portion of the ground. But if we have problems with ground, then we have to
This
do
is
it
a-
all.
this is a
So
waste of
I
time.
agree 100%. I mean, we're going down a road here that I don't think that we ought to be going down.
We should spend one more moment with everything else going on, even looking at this.
And-
I'm not doing any
No, I know.
study.
Yeah.
I'm just,
No,
you
know,
guys
let's-
said that,
let's face
you
it,
guys
Mrs.
said we're doing a
Bardell
study
came
on.
on the board, and this is what he said he wanted to do.
But wait, can you send me, this is the second time I heard it, can you
And I
send
don't
the
understand why
board,
we're doing it.
Can you send the board a copy of the estimate, that's the 6 million estimate for the lower field?
I never had an estimate for the lower field yet.
Now, which,
Some,
There was a
somewhere,
plan that was
Sure.
drawn up, and.
I got a plan because I knew somebody when this first started. I'm talking about a long time ago, just because it was an idea, and I wanted to see if it would work to even have a discussion, but I never had an estimate on it.
so where do we get 6 million? When we say 6 million,
somewhere,
There was a number floated.
there was a number floating around, and
I don't know if Paul came up with
I
it,
can't
I
tell
don't-
you where it came from, but it's not a number that I
No,
made up.
that's
All right.
absolutely true.
And so, I don't know. I mean, and when you look at a single multipurpose field versus two usable fields, to me, you're limiting your choices and the flexibility you would have having two fields that you can use as opposed to one field with lines drawn on it for two sports being played at the same time. So I don't know. I thought we were way past that until.
We were way past it, and we now are regressing. If that's the route you guys want to take, because it won't be my decision.
It won't be mine either, because I just don't see the benefit of doing that. The benefit for remediating the upper field is that you have a second usable field that can be.
I was on the same,
Well,
I'm just, Joe, I'm just reading the Buildings and Grounds notes from today to say,
All right.
we asked for a second estimate. I'm like, so what's that about? And I'm not the guy asking for it. I'm the guy asking the question, like, why do we need that?
All right.
So let's put, as far as I'm concerned, put aside the talk about the lower field. I had that conversation a year ago.
All right.
Right.
Right, I'm out
All
of
right,
that
that's
conversation, right?
gonna be, that's a big help, because that could.
I'm still trying to
that could
figure out
mean
whether
that
I'm
we
buying-
could move forward on trying to get numbers together by January that are meaningful numbers.
It's got,
If that portion now goes away, disappears, then we don't have to worry about that. Then we could put some fairly solid numbers together to put in front of the board by January the 7th.
the only thing that I have written down totals $19 million. I know we talked about changing it. I got one thing written down that says 19 million, and it's from 4 weeks ago. So if it became 16, I just need to understand what that is.
Right.
There's a resolution tonight to do this security audit that will take X amount of days or weeks to do. We need to get that back.
Right.
It's unclear to me whether I'm buying a parking lot, 1 tennis court, 5 tennis courts, or none.
All right, well, again,
Well,
that's a lot, that question's a lot easier to answer than what would it cost to redo the lower field.
But I just want,
mean,
I
we
just
can-
need to know, like, what,
that-
if we said, let's go do, like, yes, we're all in, we're gonna do it, I just need, it would be good if we had something written down that said, this is the thing I'm saying yes to.
Can I make, here's what I think we should do, because this was an important conversation. We needed to start really getting down to what we're gonna do, so.
But my frustration is I'm having the conversation, and the only thing I have in front of me is a list of committee reports. Like, it's difficult for me to operate where I just don't know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
but no, John, there was a lot of detail given out at the last
in
meeting.
one meeting. That was one meeting.
Yeah, but there was a lot of detail there. I mean,
but, okay, so of that detail, what is in and what, how did, that detail said
Well, that's
19.
what I'm saying. If we're prepared to look at it seriously by January 7th, then the Buildings and Grounds Committee should take on the responsibility of
So,
putting that in
I
front
guess
of
we
you.
say it differently. So the detail that I have says 19 million. Buildings and Grounds is saying, having been through it, it's now 16.
Right.
Can somebody tell me what I
Yes,
erased?
it was part of last year, the last week's handouts. It was there. What projects were taken out? It was there.
But the total was 19.
The total was 16, and it told you how we got from 19 to 16.
No, well,
Here's something I think we can do. If I meet with Paul, Cheryl, Cindy this week, we come up with our recommendation of what we should be doing and who should be doing the work. Let's give it to the Buildings and Grounds Committee to review and then get it to the board. And this would be before January 1st. And now you have time to digest it and decide whether or not
I
it's
think
a good
that's
idea.
doable. Whether or not the board at that point in time says it's comfortable or not, is up to the board to decide. But I'm saying that we could put in front of you as much detail as most districts get in terms of deciding whether you want to go forward with a referendum or not.
I'm ready to go. I just need the detail.
The caveat to that is that the security audit will not be there. That will not be there.
So I won't, so on the security, I won't have the audit.
You will not have an audit.
Will I have what's in the ESIP and what's not in the ESIP?
Yes, we have to decide that
We do,
ourselves.
yeah.
We need to decide that ourselves. I mean, that's absolutely true.
Okay, so.
Now,
so
you'll
we need to get
you'll
the-
have in the security portion of it what we said should be planned, whether they say that we overestimated our need or not. And then I think that's what it's gonna come down to. Did we overestimate our need? But we can safely say that it's an overestimate and not an underestimate, and if we don't need to spend it, we won't spend it.
And the security committee, and there were 2 board members there, I felt comfortable with the idea of, there's a number already in this budget for security. In other words, if some of the money now changes from one item to a different item because of this audit, but the number still stays the same, at the time, the committee felt comfortable with that.
Right, and here's an example of that, is that we have these 290 cameras. But what if we only need 250? What if we only need 230? Then there was a talk about of perhaps a improved speaker system.
All right.
And so maybe we would want to, in that case, then we would just try and improve our internal communication system that we haven't been talking about now. So money can be spent in other areas.
So that's a change to what we talked about with all that detail that we got? That's different?
That's
than-
right.
Okay. I guess we gotta do it the old-fashioned way. You just have to get a pen and a piece of paper and write it down, right?
Yep. We'll come up with our recommendation through the board's Buildings and Grounds Committee and get it to the board. And that'll be the recommendation of what we're saying we should do, if that's okay with everybody.
I think the only way we're ever gonna vote on anything is to have it written down.
Okay.
I can't see myself voting on anything that is not on a piece of paper.
I don't mean to come into this late in the game, but I found the worksheet that took us from the original 19 that was filed to what our recommendations were that got us to 16.
Yeah.
If you want to take a look at that. I mean, I don't know if
There-
you wanna-
that was-
It's in the books, I have it at home.
Yeah.
It's in the
Right.
book, right?
Yep, yep.
Okay, so that's what but that thing said, the parking lot is out.
This does not specifically say that.
It did, well, then,
I take
No,
that
it
back.
did.
I do
It
take
did. They
that
took
back.
the- they
It
took-
deleted the tennis and the parking at
Was out.
440,000.
Was
it was
out.
taken out.
It was taken out, and the intent on that, specifically that deletion, is that we would do it as an alternate. So if the bids came in low enough, you have that as an alternate, and then you can go ahead and do it. So, though it's a deletion here, doesn't mean it can be.
And that was using the 5.9 million.
Exactly.
Instead of the 4.2 million.
Right.
So if we just go to the 4.2 million and have French and Perillo, then we could still put the parking lot and the tennis courts back in and still be at 16.
Well, the 4.2 million, Joe, you're saying does not include the 5 tennis courts, it only includes one.
That's right, but let's say 75,000 apiece, So that's that would be $300,000 more for 4 new tennis courts and take out $75,000 for the rehabilitation.
So-
So we were talking about another $250,000 on top of the 4.2.
Right. Now, how much were on the priorities plan, there were boilers at FN Brown and one other building, HB,
Yes.
that we were not doing. So why would we prioritize the tennis courts over the boilers at FN Brown?
One of the things Paul says is right now, they're not needed right now. They're getting close to their life expectancy, but they're not at them yet.
But also, if we take up the tennis courts or the parking lot anytime after we fix everything else, we'll be back in the same position as we are today, and we'll have to get it looked at, pay someone to test the ground, compact it. and-
No,
or
as
we
long as
can-
it remains surfaced, you don't
as
have to
long-
do that.
Exactly, but as long as it remains surfaced.
So
but
if you don't dig
technically
it
it's
up,
not
you don't have to
remediated,
worry about it, right?
Technically, but
If you don't touch it, it won't go bad on you. If you open it,
I just have a concern around fixing everything but those 2 areas. I'd want to fix.
all I'm
everything
suggesting
for
is, we should take a look at the priorities on what we're prioritizing.
At 4.5, now you're apples to apples with the original estimate of 5.9. At 4.5 instead of the 4.2, add another 250,000 on top of that.
Yeah.
And you're at 4.5, and now you're apples to apples.
Right, so the question I'm asking is, should we do the boilers at FN Brown other than, or tennis courts?
Well, our application has to change because we didn't say in the application that we were gonna do boilers. So I don't know how that changes the whole game then, because they came out with those rod letters. So that would be, that would be a question we could call the state tomorrow and find that out.
I would tend to think that we're not going to be able to do that. And that we submitted an application, they approved it, and that's it. I mean, we can take things away, but you can't put things in that weren't there. You can put it into the referendum, which means we're going to pay for it, doesn't mean the state's going to pay for it. I mean, that ship
But
has
I
sailed.
could put the boilers in ESIP.
Well, we've got to get clarification on that, exactly what's in the ESIP now. Because, again, it wasn't in it originally, now it seems back in, but there was some question about there being an overlap between the ROD grant and the ESIP. And we need to come to some determination as to how can we make both of those work together. And I think that there's maybe a way that they can both work together. Again, when you go out and purchase this equipment through the ESIP, you're gonna pay the money out. Nobody's gonna give you that money, so it's gonna come out of the taxpayer's gonna have to pay for it. They're just gonna recover it over the course of 5 or 10 years through savings in energy. But if we get the state to pay for 40% of it up front, somehow get the two of them to dovetail.
I did ask that same question about the boilers, and the response I got was that they're not needed right now.
From, you say, yes, who'd you,
Mr. McDivitt.
okay.
But that was the response I got. Maybe that might change. I mean, it could have changed. I asked that 2 weeks ago.
All right, are we clear about how we're going ahead at this point? You're going to get
I
together?
think we're gonna do the same thing that we've been doing for the last couple of months. We're gonna attempt to write it down. Right?
Okay.
That's the,
Finalize it.
well,
Well,
you
I
gotta
think
write it down in
I
order to
think
finalize
of
it,
A
right?
lot of it is
Number
written
of-
down. It's just got to put it all together so that when you sit here, we can go to page 2, page 3, page 4, page 14, whatever page you want to go to give you the detail that you need, because I think it's there. I think we've seen it.
Okay.
It's like the new French and Perillo quote, that wasn't included in the last thing because we got it recently.
The only 3 things that are not included is the security audit results, which we're saying we're gonna probably forego, right? The ESIP, what's in, what's not. The version of the field estimate that we're gonna use, the parking lot and tennis courts in or out, right?
Yep.
Like, it's that sort of stuff that's gotta be, what are we doing, right?
Some of that stuff we just got, so we're gonna add it in, give you a finalized recommendation of what we wanna do, vet it through the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and then send it to the full board to make a decision.
Okay. All right, Finance Committee?
Yeah, Finance Committee. Finance Committee did meet. We didn't spend an awful lot of time talking about very much. We talked about, what did we talk about? Well, one of the things, and I'm gonna cut to the chase here, because we've been here for a while, is we did talk about the cafeteria situation. We heard from the auditor today that our cafeteria is operating in the red, that the state says that your cafeteria has to be at least break even. And Mr. Nardino and Mr. Forte did meet with the food service management company and to discuss ways that we can get ourselves out of this predicament. There are some proposals that may work, and we're at least attempting to come up with solutions and get us back into at least a break-even situation in the cafeteria. And that's really pretty much, I mean, we briefly went over, we did have a finance committee meeting to meet with the auditor earlier in the week, and we went over the same things that he went over tonight. So that's about it for finance.
I just want to touch on one thing, because it just regarding the cafeteria situation.